This morning, we head to Florida, where the manatee population is facing a crisis. At least 600 have died so far this year, many from starvation. Poor water quality is destroying the seagrass they rely on for food. Our Elaine Quijano traveled to Crystal River, Florida, also known as the manatee capital of the world, to see one community's innovative solution.
When Paul Cross navigates Crystal River and Kings Bay, Florida, he can't help but remember when algae choked these waters and suffocated native seagrass, the primary food source for Florida manatees.
We wouldn't even do manatee tours in the summer months. There wasn't as many manatees that stayed because we didn't have the food source, and the visibility when we did find those manatees was very poor.
As director of operations for Plantation Adventure Center, a local dive shop, Cross watched the river decline years ago. Storms and septic tank pollution had taken a toll. Lush green beds of seagrass had been overrun by thick mats of invasive algae. And with no food, the manatees had nearly disappeared. These tropical marine mammals can weigh up to 3,000 pounds, and they flock here in winter months to graze in the warmth of the 72-degree waters. When their numbers dwindled, along with other marine life, Lisa Moore realized the river was dying.
Personally, I thought, how did I let this happen? How did I not know that this was going on? And I've lived here all this time. I wasn't paying attention. And so I kind of felt like I needed to try to do something.
The dying river compelled Moore, a lifelong resident, to create an organization called Save Crystal River. In 2015, the group hired an aquatic restoration company with an untested idea. Marine biologist Ryan Brushwood works for that company, Sea and Shoreline.
So this is the bad guy of the story. This is Lingbia. As you can see, it's some gross stuff.
It's like the stuff at the bottom of the tub when the drain clogs.
Right. It feels like the stuff that clogs your drains. And here it was clogging springs. And it was outcompeting the grass just because of the sheer quantity of it. And over time, as this settled on the bottom of the seafloor and started decaying, it created a sediment that was not suitable for the plants to grow in.
Their plan was to send divers to the bottom and use giant vacuums like these to hoover up decades of algae and muck. They'd then plant seagrass back into the bay by hand, a painstaking, expensive process. Armed with research from both the company and independent scientists, Save Crystal River took its plan door to door and then to state legislators in Tallahassee. Eventually, the group convinced lawmakers to greenlight a $1.6 million state-funded pilot project to restore about 3 acres.
People around the community, a lot of them didn't believe that it would work.
Like, I was the biggest skeptic, right? When they started planting grass, and I'm like, I've seen the manatees in action. I've seen them chew roots from the trees. Like, they're going to devour all of this stuff.
But 6 years later, the beds of seagrass in the restored areas are coming back, as are the manatees, along with fish and other marine life, as we saw in a recent swim with John Spann of Plantation Adventure Center.
You know, 5 years ago, you look down, you wouldn't see the bottom. You couldn't even see it in here. And now you can swim this whole canal as you saw, and you can just see the grass, see the bottom, and that's just that grass filtering that water, holding the sediment down, doing those good things that it's meant to do.
Residents here are also moving from septic to sewer systems, reducing runoff that feeds harmful algae.
Is it starting to look like the river you remember from your childhood?
Yeah. You go and you look at the springs, and you can see all the way down in the springs again. You can clearly see the fish. It's back, and it's just going to get better.
I imagine that must make you pretty happy.
It does. My children, my grandchildren, all the other people that come here, visitors from around the world, they need to know what this special place is.
The pilot program started with 3 acres, but they've since restored about 60, and they're hoping to restore more than 90 acres by this time next year. Now, this is not cheap. All that work will cost about $40 million, but the results are clear, and now other communities in Florida with similar problems are looking at this as a potential solution.
And manatees are so important to the ecosystem. That's what people may not realize, that they keep it free of invasive species and overgrowth of vegetation, and serve as a source of fertilizer. So that's why it's important to save them.
Yeah, when we were setting up the story earlier, we were talking about how humans have an impact on things like this. You say, oh, surprise, surprise, here we are messing something up again.
Yes.
But we have an opportunity to
Yeah.
change it for the future.
People have come together, and that's what I think is so extraordinary about this story, is that people didn't realize at first what was happening because they couldn't necessarily see.
Right.
Once they learned about it, they figured out, how do we solve
Yeah.
it? What do we do? We got to go door to door. We have to do the hard work of convincing people, convince those neighbors, convince the state legislature. Now you have
We
progress.
need to fix these. You look very comfortable in the water there, Ms.
I
Quijano.
love the water.
fish.
Yeah.
Love those manatees.
Elaine's next chapter in 20 years.
I'll
Thank
gladly
you,
be your
Elaine.
aquatic correspondent.
All right. There you go.
There you go.
I like it.